Air is this invisible fluid that's all around us, and we take it for granted how impactful it is on our lives. We all have to make our own choices, and the more information we have, the more we can make better choices on what's good for us.
Welcome to Golden Girl, a space where we dive deep into health, healing, connection, and community. I'm your host, Becca Golden, and this podcast is all about sharing and documenting my journey. Each episode, we'll discuss topics like health and wellness, what I'm learning in therapy, work-life balance, relationships, community, and all the ways I strive for more aliveness and presence every day. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Golden Girl. I'm super excited about today's episode because we have an amazing guest here with us. I'm sitting with Sean Harris. Sean is a building science and indoor air quality consultant and the owner of Indoor Air Quality of Texas. Sean is really knowledgeable and really passionate about indoor air quality. And the reason that that's relevant and super important is because my mission with this podcast is to help people make more educated decisions about their health. Throughout most of my life, I was making all of these decisions that I didn't know were impacting my health. And it's because nobody really teaches you this stuff. So my goal with these conversations is not to tell anyone what to do. It's just to really bring awareness to these topics so that you feel empowered to make more educated decisions about your own health and your own body, whatever makes the most sense for you, because we all deserve to make conscious choices about our lives. So thank you so much, Sean, for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it would be great if you could give everyone a little bit of background about you and how you became so passionate about indoor air quality.
Yeah, happy to. So started out going to college, thinking I was going to be a builder. That was going to be an easy path. I'd built a couple of houses going to school, and I was like, oh, that's easy. I'm going to do that. And it came time to actually purchase my first project, basically downtown Austin. Basically, I was going to knock down the house that was there and build this 5-star greenhouse, because that was the thing back then in the early 2000s was green building. And I quickly figured out that when I was now in charge of making these decisions, I had no idea what made a good wall assembly, what made people comfortable inside their house. And so I went back to my mentor at the time, a guy named Christoph Irwin with Positive Energy. He's the smartest guy I know in so many different fields. He's amazing. And I said to him, how did you know what to do in these situations? He's like, well, funny you should ask. I'm getting into building science, understanding how homes function. And I was like, well, great. If you're doing that, I'm just going to come work for you for free for 6 months. And you're going to teach me everything you know about this topic. And then I'll go back to being a builder. And when I got into building science and realized how complex it is and how important it is, I started testing all of these homes and seeing people that were sick or uncomfortable or had high energy bills. And we were testing these homes and finding all of these problems with air leakage, infiltration, duct leakage, things like that. And I really realized that what I wanted to do was make an impact for people. And at this point, it wasn't really a whole lot about health. It was about energy efficiency and comfort. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to start up a company making a difference in this area, and I need to air seal and insulate things, and started getting into that. And then quickly realized, as I'm in these homes all the time and seeing all of this mold that is happening in these homes, it really made me realize how serious this topic is and how undereducated most people are. Air is this invisible fluid that's all around us, and we take it for granted how impactful it is on our lives. So that's what got me into it and why I'm so passionate about it. As the years went on, I realized I was working with a lot of sick people, and they really needed answers on how to prevent mold inside their homes. So I then just dove headfirst into indoor air quality from a building science perspective. This education I got about how homes work really applies to how to optimize health inside these buildings. So that's my background.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that you do what you do, because as somebody who's struggled with chronic illness before and currently, I find it really validating to hire a professional who's an expert in their field. Mm-hmm. And, when you come into the house and you say, here are all these areas where I've noticed these could be areas of concern, mm-hmm. and this is why it could be impacting your health. It's so validating to hear that from someone else, because so much of the chronic illness community is gaslit, especially when the problem is invisible to them.
Exactly. And there's a lot of sort of siloing that happens where people get in their own little areas or soundboards or something like that. And what's great for me is that I have this experience of being in hundreds of homes across the entire sort of like Central and South Texas area. And so I really get a good feel for what is normal or what is causing people to be sick. And I really have this sort of experience of, I get to draw from other people's experiences to sort of hone in on what it is that's important and what it is that needs to be addressed. So yeah, it's definitely, I feel very fortunate to be in this position to help people.
You're doing a great job. One of the things I loved about our visit was that right when you arrived, we sat down and talked first before you even did the inspection, and you educated me about the toxin funnel. I've never been educated about the toxin funnel by a building science professional or an air quality professional. I had already gone through all of these different steps of hiring different inspectors and consultants and people to come and evaluate my house, and most of them told me, everything looks pretty good. They looked in the attic. They said, well, we didn't see anything really. And they pretty much told me that everything was probably fine. And as soon as you got to my house, we sat down and you educated me about the toxin funnel. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that from your point of view.
Yeah. So this analogy came up out of necessity, where I would talk to people and they would ask me these questions of like, hey, how come I'm really sensitive, but my husband is totally fine? And how come, my son's reacting really poorly, but I'm not? And how come I can be in certain moldy areas, but not other moldy areas? And like, there's all these unanswered questions. And not that this analogy is like a fits-all situations, but it really helps to explain some of these unanswered questions and helps you to sort of empower yourself and to make your own decisions on what's going on with your health personally. So
I'm gonna just pause you and give context, because I think it's important to set the stage. So when Sean is going to these people's houses, the people that he was just talking about, they're often people who probably have mold or something else in their house, and not all of the family members are feeling the effects of it. So it might be that one parent is really getting sick and one child is really getting sick, and then the rest of the family is not. And so that's just the context, is that it could be mold in the house that we're referring to when you're experiencing this. It's because you've been hired to inspect, I assume.
Exactly. And you mentioned gaslighting. Unfortunately, I'm in a lot of situations where the husband specifically, not every husband, obviously, but the husband specifically is saying, yeah, I think it's all in her head. I think she's just making it up. And that is not something that's acceptable. Even if that were the case, how could you tell me, a consultant, these things, right? Like I need to come up with a way to communicate with everybody, not just the person who is affected, because the people who are affected, they're typically on board with my messaging and what I have to say. And it's the other people that need some education on how do we all get on the same page with this topic. So anyway, to sort of go into what the toxin funnel is, right? Everybody has this imaginary funnel over the tops of our heads, and we're pouring toxins into it all day long. And these toxins are from everything, from the flame retardants in your couch, from the mold and mycotoxins, obviously, are causing a big issue, but it's the fragrances we're exposed to. It's the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, the chemicals, all of these things that are not great for our bodies. They're going in. They're being absorbed through our skin, through our respiratory system, and also through what we eat. So all of these things are a problem. And from a building science perspective, I talk about source control being really the best way to deal with these things. And that just means we stop pouring the things into the funnel, which is great, but we can never know exactly where all of these sources are coming from. And that's why this is such a complex topic, really. So the toxins going in, and then the funnel, right? The funnel varies in size depending on people, and these funnels also vary in the opening size at the bottom. So the funnel is your body's ability to hold toxins, and the opening at the bottom is your body's ability to detox those toxins, for those toxins to come out of your body. And the way this funnel sort of works is also there's like a sponge in the middle of this funnel that is going to hold on to some amount of toxins always and sort of delay some of those toxins being released. So to complete the analogy, we've got a little sponge in there as well. So if we were designing a funnel, we would want the biggest funnel possible. We'd want to hold all the toxins inside the funnel. Because once your funnel overflows, that's when we have problems where we have, a lot of people think of like mold and things with having respiratory issues, but actually depression, anxiety, brain fog are the top three that I come across when I talk to people about their symptoms. So there's a lot of other symptoms that aren't really talked about. And it's hard actually really for most people, especially when we're talking about this invisible thing, to relate these other symptoms that are not asthma or some sort of respiratory issue that most people sort of think as when they think of mold anyway. So So anyway, so we've got this funnel. When it overflows, there's problems. If we were designing a funnel opening at the bottom, we would also want that funnel to be as big as possible so that nothing stays inside us. Everything just goes straight through. And this part of our funnel is about living a healthy lifestyle, about being able to detox, about sweating, red light therapy. Then there's going to be sleeping. Sleeping is really important for detox as well. So women need 9 hours of sleep every night, not just 8. And now that I'm tracking my sleep, it's really hard to get that amount of sleep every night. So it is a really difficult thing to maintain your funnel and funnel size to sort of optimize your body. But also a lot of this isn't really controlled by you. So there's genetics, right? Genetics dictate how big your funnel is going to be in real life. And 24% of people have a genetic predisposition to not be able to respond well or detox these toxins.
So that would be like that percentage of people have a really dense sponge, essentially, for the purposes of the anatomy.
Or a really small opening in the funnel. So it just doesn't get through. So the sponge was also probably be pretty dense, but really just that opening of the bottom of the funnel is pinched off. And so as a society as a whole, 24% of people have this genetic predisposition. And then we've got other people that are in this lower category of the funnel size that have smaller funnels, which would be people with SIRS, PANS, PANDAS, Lyme disease, autoimmune issues, cancer. There's a lot of people in society that are pretty sensitive to their environment and are going to naturally have smaller funnels. Then we've got the middle sort of section of society. These people are generally healthy, but could easily fall into these lower categories through genetics, poor life decisions, maybe lots of stress in their lives, things like that, trauma. So there's this middle section of people that are generally not super healthy, but okay. And then there's the top 10% or so of people. These people are genetically invincible. These people could be in moldy environments all the time and not really respond to that environment. And, maybe when they're 80, they end up with a rash on their arm and a headache or something, right? That's completely unrelated. Oh, it's just allergies or something. And so we, as a society, tend to focus more on the people that are well, the top 10% of society. And that could be anybody, which is great for them. But, if we think about this bottom, at least 50% of society is struggling with indoor air and, sort of being sensitive to their environment. We should really consider designing our environments around that section of society because it's so big. And so anyway, so that's what the funnel is about, is where is your perceived toxin funnel size? And if you have a really small funnel, that means that we need to take care and we need to make sure that we are putting things in our environment that are good for us and taking out the things that are bad. I mentioned earlier about the husband who thinks it's all in the woman's head. So the reason why I say it's the husband is because typically men are less susceptible to their environments for a number of reasons, one of which is toxins are stored in fat. And naturally, women have more fat on their bodies than men. So women are already predisposed to have this sort of smaller toxin funnel. And then societal pressures from chemicals and fragrances and cleaners and perfumes and all of the other things. So because through societal pressures, you automatically have a smaller funnel and are more likely to respond to your environment. And so very often, the homes I go into, it is the women or the children that are more sensitive than the men, typically, not always.
And I would say a huge percentage of younger women are on hormonal contraceptives, hormonal birth control, because maybe they were having hormone problems as a result of breathing unhealthy indoor air quality all the time. The indoor air quality could affect their hormone levels, make their hormones crazy, out of whack. And so they go to their doctor. The doctor just says, well, get on this birth control pill. So now you're constantly taking a hormonal birth control pill that is depleting you of your minerals. It is hard on your gut lining. And right. I'm not going to go on the full birth control tangent, but there are so many women who maybe if they hadn't been in a moldy environment, they wouldn't have had those hormone fluctuations in the first place. But now you're just kind of adding more and more into that funnel. Mm-hmm. And that's in addition to, makeup products, synthetic fragrance and perfumes and things like that. There's been studies about the materials in yoga pants. And the other thing that applies to everybody, not just women, is fragrance in laundry detergent and air fresheners and candles.
Definitely.
I think synthetic fragrance, once you're out of it for so long, you can start smelling it on everything around you. And it makes you just so aware that stuff is not good for you. So it's going to clog up the funnel. Yep. So maybe you're saying maybe somebody could be pretty healthy. They could theoretically have been in that top 50% of people who can handle this stuff. But maybe if they have scented candles everywhere and air fresheners, they're using laundry detergent, they're putting on makeup with formaldehyde in it, and they're using the wrong cooking stuff. All of that combined, without even factoring in the air quality, could put them in that bottom 50%. And then you add the air quality on top of it.
Yeah. So what we're talking about right now is what's called endocrine system disrupting chemicals. And so endocrine system is basically everything, every function in your body sort of relates back to this endocrine system because it controls your hormone regulation and how many hormones go where and all of that. And so if we are disrupting that system or imitating certain hormonal factors, it's going to cause dysregulation in your body in so many different ways. You've already mentioned a few of them, but mold and mycotoxins fall into that category of endocrine system disrupting, just like the fragrances. And so long-term exposure to these problems eventually lead to your funnel filling up and eventually lead to this tipping point of problems.
And that mold impact on your hormones, that applies to both men and women.
Right,
so
100%.
Anybody who is not in the invincible category is going to be affected in some level, whether they notice it or not.
Exactly.
Maybe it's just filling up their funnel a little bit, so maybe they don't notice it, but it's cumulative. So if you're not draining the funnel well, then you'll eventually notice an impact.
Exactly.
Can you help us understand how this all now ties into indoor air quality in someone's home? Like if I'm a homeowner, I assume that my house is designed to take care of that stuff because I have an air conditioning system. So to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning?
Correct.
Okay. And if your house has an HVAC system, I think most people assume that it's filtering these things out. And a lot of people know that they have these air filters in their vents that are part of their house. They can switch those out. And they assume it's taking care of dust. It's taking care of VOCs. And if I don't have a really old house, I'm not going to have mold because my house is pretty new and I'm a really clean person. People think if they're very clean and they change out their filters and they have a newer house, mold can't possibly be growing in it. And so whether we're talking about mold or other things, like I know you talk about radon sometimes, how does the building structure and people's health and all the things you can do, how does that all tie together from your vantage point?
Yeah. So let me just take a step back and try and define some terms for you.
Thank you.
First, building science. The thing that I'm about is basically the study of the system of interrelated systems that make up a home. And all of these things are interconnected. So your enclosure or the wall assembly that you have inside your house is what gives the house its structure, where the insulation is stored, where the air barrier is for your home. So
what is air barrier?
It's what keeps the air out. So an air barrier is something that keeps the air inside the air, outside.
So sealing up the walls really tightly, essentially?
Sure, yeah. But basically, everybody has this wall assembly, this enclosure that I'm talking about. It is the exterior walls of the house and the roof and sometimes the floor as well. So this boundary is where we define inside versus outside. And this system of systems, even just inside a wall assembly, it varies across the country as far as how it's going to be constructed, where we need to put certain air barriers or insulation inside this structure. But this is the start of what happens on the inside because of this air infiltration or thermal bridging or all of these different things in just this part that impact VOCs inside your home and all of these other things. So this is one section. Then we have the actual interior space and the furnishings inside that would be another sort of section that's related to this enclosure. And then there would be the HVAC system, which would be the basically distribution of hot and cold air, maybe some ventilation and things like that as well. Filtration is typically a part of that in our climate. So we'll speak just to sort of our area, basically in Central Texas. We have typically, most people have central air conditioning systems, which means that we have this box that makes hot and cold air, and we have ductwork that distributes this hot and cold air throughout the house. And sometimes this is ran up in unconditioned space in an attic. Sometimes this is ran like in a crawl space under the house and then comes up through the floors. Most of the time, that's sort of how this is distributed, and where that ductwork is and how hot that, the heat that ductwork is exposed to, all of those things are going to be determining what is happening inside the home and how well we're managing our humidity, which again relates back to VOCs and mold and things like that. So anyway, building science studies the system of interrelated systems and how all of them function together. So our HVAC system in our climate anyway is going to have a full duct system where most rooms get ducts, and these ducts deliver the air to the rooms that they're in. And then there's a return that sucks the air back to the air conditioning system, where in that system is going to be the return where the air gets sucked into, and then the filter where air gets filtered sometimes. Sometimes it's at the grill, sometimes it's back at the system. And then the air is either going to be heated or cooled and then distributed again throughout the house. Good.
Okay. I'm going to try to repeat it back to you as a regular person who's not an expert in this.
Yeah,
so you're saying central air conditioned homes, that's the central air conditioning means that there's like a main hub, a box of where the output air is coming from.
Yes.
And then the ductwork are those metal tubes. If a room has a vent, is it fair to say that there's ductwork going to that room if there's a vent in it?
Likely so. Yes.
Likely so. So then the air is going out of the vent to air condition the room. Can you go back to the return part of this?
Sure.
Where is it returning into? And then maybe just that part a little slower.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So we have like two different sides of the airstream. There's the supply where air gets supplied to the rooms. And this could be hot or cold depending on the time of year.
And that's like from the outside
and
typically?
that comes from the air conditioning system. The air conditioning system supplies the hot or cold air to the rooms. And then the air has to come from someplace. And ideally we are returning, supply and return. So we are sucking air from the rooms back to this central air handler. And so sometimes the return has ducts that go into the room. So there'd be two vents in your ceiling. One is blowing, one is sucking.
So the returns are the ones that you're replacing the filter on.
Exactly.
Because when the air is returned to the central box, you want it to be clean of all the VOCs. Okay. I'm following.
Great.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll get to this in a second, but VOCs specifically are gases. They're actually not easily filtered. So we filter particulates and we stop some of the particulates from going through these filters. But most gases are a lot smaller molecules and need carbon or activated charcoal or something to actually filter them. So
those filters on your vents are more for like dust, allergens, things that are bigger particles that aren't gaseous so that it sticks to that filter.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the system of interrelated systems, this HVAC system is a major contributor to what impacts everything else because we're moving lots and lots of air around your house, like many, many thousands of pounds of air, right? Going through these systems. It's really impressive. If you take the weight of air, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is a significant amount of airflow in a day. Thousands of pounds of air go through this system. So it's a lot. And again, it's an invisible fluid. We're immersed in it all the time. We sort of take it for granted what exactly these systems do. So how cold your house is going to determine the VOC off-gassing, for example, right? So hotter surfaces are going to off-gas more VOCs out of them. Also, higher humidity environments are going to off-gas more VOCs out of them. If we have heat and humidity, the humidity part could be condensing onto these cold ducts. So we could also have potentially microbial growth inside the duct system.
That's a really, really important point. I want to just make sure that we call attention to that last one because so many people listening to this struggle with mold illness.
Yeah.
You're saying that it's the return is like sucking in cold air that creates condensation or?
No. Yeah. Okay. So let me help break it down. Yeah. So basically, you were talking about maybe a common misconception that the HVAC system just magically takes care of all of these things. And I'm bringing up the point that it's possible that the HVAC system could be sort of a contributor to sources of mold that get now distributed throughout the home.
Which is exactly what happened in my case,
Yeah. So cold surfaces are wet surfaces. Any surface you see that's cold is wet. And it just is a matter of like variance of how much, right? So in this room right now, let's say that we have dew points, like 55-degree dew point would be nice. That means any surface that's under 55 degrees is definitely going to be wet at some level. But even lesser degrees than that, microscopically, things are going to be wet at different levels of cold inside a room. So if we think about cold surfaces in a house, the air blowing out of the supply vent up here is about 55 degrees. And if we have a 55-degree dew point in here, that means that register up there is wet. Right now, it's wet. And the rate of wetting needs to be less than the rate of drying. Because if it's always wet all the time, now we've got some mold issues that could occur. But if it gets wet a little, that's totally fine. We have resilient materials. They get wet, they can dry back out and everything is fine. But in an HVAC system, in a humid climate, when we have 50-degree coil temperatures back at this air handler where the air originates, then the surfaces right beyond that are 50 degrees, which is below this 55-degree dew point that I mentioned, right? And so that means that moisture back there can accumulate, and there's no light coming in, so there's no UV or anything to sort of like decontaminate any of these things, which UV lights are a whole nother situation.
Yeah,
I was talking about natural UV, right? Like sunlight coming in from outside and sort of warming and sort of deactivating some of these chemicals on surfaces. Anyway, that's how this system can grow mold. So that's what we want to avoid, is we want to provide materials that are resilient, that can also dry, so that we're not having our AC system being a distributor of contaminants.
Thank you for that overview. And I want to clarify what you're saying, because from my point of view, I am a homeowner of a 3.5-year-old home that started growing mold that got into the ductwork, all those metal components that bring the air to all of the rooms of the house. And what you're describing, it sounds like by design, an air conditioning system in Central Texas, which is going to have these cold metal tubes in an environment that has a dew point that would allow those tubes to not be able to dry. So it kind of sounds like by design, the HVAC system will grow mold unless you're doing something to make sure it doesn't.
So my experience in Central Texas, and I have hundreds and hundreds of homes, like in 2024, I was in 140 homes. And of the 140 homes, 95% of them had mold in their supply ductwork and one other place. So we are in a climate where it is really hard to not grow mold inside these areas. And part of the problem is the materials. So you mentioned metal tubes going throughout your house. We are a first cost optimized society where we don't install the best materials from an indoor air quality perspective. We install the cheapest, fastest, easiest materials. And that is typically a product called ductboard, which is a very porous material that's made out of fiberglass. And we also install flex duct, which is this accordion-like plastic material that goes to all the rooms.
Oh, plastic.
Plastic.
Oh,
yeah,
great. I didn't realize that. So they're plastic, not metal, those tubes that I'm picturing.
They're foil on the outside, which is why you think that they're metal, is because it looks they're foil facing, but it's all plastic.
So all of the air that we're breathing is just getting fed through
tube.
a moldy plastic tube.
Yeah. I don't know what the implications are of like microplastics or anything like that. Like that'd be a cool study I don't really want to know either, because this is what we're doing as a society right now. So metal would be better, because metal is a non-porous surface, and the metals that are used in duct systems are naturally antimicrobial. So there's like tin and zinc and things like that naturally don't grow mold. So
where is the porous part of this? So the accordion looking tin covered plastic thing, that's plastic. And then can you explain porous, meaning absorbing moisture, not necessarily drying it, but just housing moisture, I guess. Right. Where are those elements? Yeah, so typically in Central Texas anyway, we build with ductboard supply plenums. And this is the box that attaches to the air handler. So this is that central box.
Place.
The central box that's giving air to feed to all the rooms. That is made of something that is porous.
Correct. And also fiberglass, which is a respiratory irritant. So that's not good either. So So by design, we're sort of setting ourselves up for, hey, let's make the wettest, coldest surface in our home a sponge so that we can absorb all of the moisture. And it takes longer for the moisture to dry back out when it gets wet.
And put it in the hottest part of your house, which doesn't have any ventilation and is spray foam insulated everywhere. So it's really well insulated. Everything that's in there is going to stay in there. And it's in the attic of most houses in Texas, so it's the hottest place, which I imagine is then the most unlikely place for the moisture to dry.
Right. So a couple of things that are a little off on your statement.
Okay, please correct me.
So first, different people have different constructed types of houses. A lot of people still have what are called vented attics, where they don't have spray foam. They have this vent system where they have soffit vents and ridge vents, and air can come into their attic from outside. And this can cause its own set of problems where we have, 80-degree dew point, high humidity air outside that gets pushed into houses, attic spaces, and it's 140 degrees up there with, 80, 90% humidity. So significant humidity up there. And that's when you get lots of mold and condensation on the outside of these things, because we're basically trying to make ice in an oven. And newer homes that are also sort of, like the next step up in cost perspective, get spray foam insulation, which is like your house. Your house has spray foam insulation in the walls and in the ceiling and at the roof decking. So what that does is allow your duct system to be in a tempered space, which is actually really great. Instead of it being 140 degrees up there, it's more like 80 or 90 degrees. And so it's better. Your home is better from that perspective. There's another like VOC off-gassing of spray foam. That's a whole nother conversation. But generally keeping this area in a semi-conditioned environment is better. But if we lower the temperature of something, but keep the amount of humidity in there, now we run into condensation because we've got cooler surfaces. Whereas in that 140 degree attic, all that heat up there means that there's a lot of drying potential of wet surfaces where things get wet and they immediately dry back out to the air because it's so hot.
Oh, so that's better.
Sometimes.
Wait, I think I'm confused. Yeah. So if the attic is hotter, that would be better because it would be more likely to dry the surfaces.
Well, yeah. So then it's a nuanced topic, right? Okay. So if it is hotter, it means that the drying potential is there. Things will evaporate quicker. And so we want good drying. We want heat, but heat also means that you're going to hold a lot of humidity in the air, right? So if we have a leaky enclosure where we're now a super hot, humid attic, all that air is going to come in through duct leakage or enclosure leakage into the house and now cause issues on the inside because of that. So,
but if you have a super hot, not humid attic, then
there'd be lots of drying. Exactly. It would be nice because there'd be lots of drying that happens there.
Okay, great. So, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a complex topic because we have these complicated building methodologies that are quite frankly outdated. Ventilated attics are for a different part of the country. They shouldn't even be down here in a hot, humid climate. In a hot, humid climate, we should always be having our ducts in conditioned space, not trying to make ice in an oven. So eventually we'll get there, I think, as a society. But right now we're still mixing it up with different technologies.
So with all of these houses that you're seeing in Central Texas, I'm sure you get to see a wide variety of types of builds. But for all the newer construction, this is just something I hear all the time. People say, your house was brand new. How do you have mold? And obviously what we just discussed is one of the contributing factors to how a new house could have mold. But is there anything being done by newer construction homes to try to get ahead of this?
So building the home tighter is really important, and spray foam helps achieve that. So source control, or just control in general, is really important. If we're trying to control where humidity goes and comes from, we need to stop it at the source, stop it from getting into our houses in the first place. So it's always going to be wetter in our climate, always going to be wetter outside than inside. So we want to stop that. We want to put up a barrier and say, nope, all of that humidity is staying outside. We're not going to let it into our homes. But inside our homes, we also have a lot of problems, right? So we're breathing, we're exercising, we're cooking, we're boiling water. We have all of these furnishings around us that have water and moisture in them. When a home first gets constructed, there's, 2,000, 2,500 square foot home has about that many gallons of moisture. So 2,500 gallons of moisture in all of the materials, in the slab, in the paints, in the drywall that is coming out in a new construction
Before anyone even lives there?
Before anyone even lives there. Putting all of these things together means that there's a lot of water that has to come out of these materials. And so generally new construction homes have a lot of high humidity. They just can't take any more humidity from that perspective. But then, we open up the windows and all that humidity comes in, or during construction, this happens a lot where the air conditioner is on and they just installed the drywall and they're mudding and, they're hot in there even still because all the other doors are open. So they open up their windows and it's just a lot of humidity and a lot of cold surfaces that could get wet. So.
So what should somebody even be looking for? Like if they know that they've lived in their house, they think they're fine.
Yeah.
But maybe they don't know what their HVAC system even looks like. Maybe they have never asked questions about it because, like I said, nobody was really educated about these things unless you take your own steps to learn about it. So what could an average person do to just learn more about their HVAC system and potentially take preventative action to make sure that the indoor air quality is not too humid and that they're managing the humidity levels in their house?
Yeah. So first, you don't know about your home's previous history of exposure, so you can't really go back in time. However, that's sort of what I try to sort of expose for people is what has this house been through? You may be managing your humidity now, but was there some sort of moisture event that caused rust or mold, or, if someone forgot to change a filter at some point or even replace a filter. And now the system's been ran without a filter for 3 months of its life or something. So there are lots of things that you can't really tell the history of without a thorough investigation. But initial steps that a homeowner can take are, first, monitor your humidity. Get a little temperature and humidity sensor and make sure that you're maintaining normal levels of humidity.
What would that be?
And so normal levels are 45, 50% is 45 is ideal. I want everybody to be at 45% relative humidity. And the reason for that,
in their house, in every room of their house.
Exactly. That's the ideal amount of humidity. And the reason why I say 45% is a number of reasons. There's an indoor air quality expert named Lou Harriman, which is like sort of one of the predominant like building science experts in our field. And I asked him directly, like, what is the ideal amount of humidity? And he said that what we want to care about is dew point. We want to control wet surfaces. And at most temperatures that we keep in our homes between 65 and 80 degrees, 45% gets us to dew points that are appropriate, where we're not going to be condensing surfaces very often. So that's the first reason why 45% is recommended. The second is lung health. So lungs have tissues inside them, and if we're breathing really, really humid air all the time, that is actually not great for our lung tissues to heal.
Really?
So we want 45% from a lung health perspective.
I always think of lung health. I always think like you want your lungs to have moisture, because I think of people who like will go over a boiling pot of water and breathe in the steam, the moisture.
Typically, like when we're sick or something and we have all this congestion built up in our lungs, we want to add more moisture to that to try and break up some of that congestion. So
but a healthy person should not have that type.
We don't need high humidity. It's not as good for lung health as this middle of the road 45%. So next, if we go over the 45%, we are now increasing our exposure to dust mites, mold spores, and VOC off-gassing. So above 45, it's like the amount of risk goes up. And obviously, the higher the humidity, the more the risk. So I'm not saying, I'm at 46%, that's bad. It's like more like, I wanted a 45% because I know that somewhere in your room is going to be 55% and probably closer to 60%. And at 60%, we definitely have this higher VOC off-gassing, higher mold spores, higher condensing surface risk.
Yeah. And something that you mentioned on a previous podcast was that if you have a huge vaulted ceiling, your humidity levels where you are spending time might be within that 45 percentage range. But if you're not testing the humidity levels, I mean, I had like a 20-foot high ceiling on my second story. I don't know what the humidity levels were up there.
Right.
So I think that's important. And what I started doing once I suspected that I had mold, I just bought these cheap little things on Amazon that tested the humidity levels. And my house was pretty close to the 45% range on most days. And what I noticed was it was interesting to see it over time. If I started to see them trending up, if you don't know where your house is at, then you have no baseline. So if your house is at 80% all the time, that might be more of an alarm bell than if it's maybe 60% one day, but most of the time it's 45. Is that fair to say?
So throughout the year, your house is going to change a lot. So oftentimes, our air conditioners are our biggest dehumidifier. So during peak dehumidification times, or like peak heating times, so peak of summer, while it's pretty humid outside, your air conditioner is going to be getting rid of a lot of that moisture. And you can really sort of manage that 45 to 50% during the peak of summer. The problem is when our air conditioners stop running. So in shoulder season time, so Austin, for example, has an average outside temperature of 72 degrees. So we have a lot of times where it's really hot, but we also have a lot of times throughout the day or throughout the year where it's 70 degrees outside and our air conditioners don't turn on, but we're still creating all this moisture. So these shoulder season times where we're not using our air conditioner, that is when we have the highest humidity typically seen in homes. And that's going to vary, maybe in this sort of like early springtime, like where we are right now, or also the like fall time where we get a lot of just mild temperatures. So in the summer, probably okay. Depending if you have a lot of infiltration, then that can be a problem. In the winter, we're generally okay. It rains a lot in the wintertime, and so higher humidities are there because we have a very mild winter here. But once it gets to really cold temperatures, our humidity then drops, and colder air can't hold as much moisture, so we're going to get to really dry points in our cycle as well. But very rarely do we need like humidification. We really need to add moisture because we very rarely get to that threshold of under 30%. And so I'm not advocating for really dry, because once we get down to below that 30%, we get higher ozone inside homes, we get dry skin, dry sinuses. We don't want things that are being too dry. So we just want that Goldilocks sort of 45%. So.
Great. And I'm going to bring this back to what you were talking about, having really good insulation. Like the goal is to keep your house very tightly insulated. I want to be so clear, like people should not be opening their windows if outside is over 45% humidity.
Yeah. So
or like how would you, I want to advise people, like when should they not be opening their windows and airing out their house?
Definitely. So it's a tricky topic. And so real quick, so there's two different things. There's insulation and air sealing. And so we want our air sealing of the home is more important than a humid climate than the insulation. So,
I don't know the difference. I don't understand the difference.
Yeah. So insulation is like a jacket, right? So you put on a nice warm like a sweater, like a wool sweater, let's say, right? And so that keeps us warm, right? The wool sweater keeps us warm. If we have a fan blowing on us or outside on a cold winter day, all of a sudden this nice fuzzy wool sweater that we have is insulation, but it is not air sealing, and you will be very cold very quickly, even though you have this nice fluffy layer of insulation on you. And so air sealing keeps the air on one side and the other side of the air barrier. Air sealing is like a ski jacket because the air doesn't penetrate through.
Exactly.
Yeah. Air sealing is more like a rain jacket in the sense
a rain jacket over the wool sweater.
So you would have a rain jacket, right? That a different level of building science, but the rain jacket sort of keeps the wind out, right? But doesn't have any insulation to it. So they're two separate things. So a ski jacket would be the wool sweater and this sort of outside air barrier or rain jacket that would stop the air.
The insulation is like wearing a wool sweater, and then the sealing, what did you say?
Yeah, so the air sealing part.
The air sealing is a rain jacket over the wool sweater.
Right, or a windbreaker or something, right?
Windbreaker, something
keep the air out. Yeah.
Okay, so, great.
Yeah, so you want all of this control on the house. You want a nice sweater and also this nice windbreaker. Mm-hmm. You also want good ventilation in a home. So you can't just shut everything down and stop everything, because now you're trapping inside those VOCs and things like that. Yeah. So you really want to allow air to come in to dilute all the things that we can't filter or dehumidify, things like that. But in a humid climate, that is really challenging on like, when do you open your windows? When do you add ventilation to your home? Mm-hmm. In my own house, I have a weather station that has dew point on it. So it's kind of a complicated topic because it's a nuanced thing, right? So dew point is the temperature at which the air will condense onto surfaces. So
the temperature at which the air will condensation will.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
The dew point is the temperature at which condensation would form on a surface.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if all of our surfaces in here are, we keep it around 70 degrees. So this is a 70-degree surface, right? And our air conditioning up there is a 55-degree surface. So if we're going to open a window, we need to know what the dew point is outside to know if we're making any surfaces inside wet. And so the dew point will tell us that. So the reason why we can't use relative humidity is because relative humidity is relative to the temperature. So if it's really, really hot outside, let's say it's 100 degrees outside and, it says it's 30% relative humidity. Well, if you bring that same quantity of air inside and you cool it down, but keep the amount of humidity, now we are at a much higher relative humidity. And so it's deceiving. You can't just open up the window on a 100-degree day because if, the relative humidity is low. You need to look at the actual dew point, which allows you to compare apples to apples. And I'm sorry, it's a complicated topic. I'm not doing a great job of explaining
that's
it,
okay.
But looking for lower dew points is the point. So if we have, again, a 55-degree dew point or less outside, that's when I open my windows. Assuming that, there's no smoke or allergy issues or cedar or something like that that's outside. So yeah, we do want to open up our windows occasionally. Our body's interaction with nature, super important. And so I don't want to tell people, don't open your windows or something.
Right.
It's an important thing. We just need to do it responsibly. And if it's too humid outside, maybe we turn off our air conditioner before.
Okay. And the responsible way to do it would be like for someone who listened and that went completely over their head and they're like, just tell me what the dew point needs to be. Mm-hmm. Is 55-degree dew point a generally
Yes.
pretty safe number to open your windows most times of year.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
as long as it's below that, then you're fine.
Okay.
If it's above that a little bit, then turn off your air conditioner. Stop making 55-degree surfaces in your home. And now we can be a little bit higher on that.
Interesting.
So yeah, we don't want wet surfaces, and that's where that comes in.
Okay. And when we were talking earlier about the humidity levels in your house and you want it to be around 45%, is that relative humidity? That's the relative humidity that you want.
And I say relative because like most loggers you get have a relative humidity reading. I can't just always talk in dew point to people because they don't know what that is. And so relative humidity of 45% means that at any relative temperature that we typically keep it at, it's going to be relatively okay. So.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to, let me use the right terminology, when it comes to creating a tight air seal around your house, this was something I didn't realize. When I moved into my house, it's on like a sloped lot. So the first year or two, everything was shifting a little bit. And the floors separated from the baseboards of the house pretty much in the entire house by like, a couple millimeters. It was minimal. But the caulking, which is that like rubbery type of sealant that they put to attach the baseboards to the floor, it was lifted. So there was a very slight opening in all of my floors to the wall cavity. And I always thought that was a cosmetic thing. I'm like, oh, this is ugly, but it takes a lot of time and I'm like relentlessly DIY. So I refused to hire someone to just come and seal up all the floorboards because I didn't realize it was any issue. Now that we've gone through the inspection, I've learned that any opening to the interstitial wall cavity is going to potentially increase your risk of
air infiltration.
Okay. So where are the places that you see that the most in your inspections in houses that somebody who's listening could take care of pretty easily to seal it up?
So it depends on how handy you are. In your case, you're pretty handy.
Or hire someone to seal
exactly.
it up for them.
So I mentioned there's two different types of enclosures. There's like bat or blown-in insulation that's in the wall cavities, or there's spray foam. And so the vented attic typically has bat or blown-in insulation in the attic and in the walls, whereas your home is spray foamed all the way through. And so those two different ones are going to sort of vary on what it is I recommend and where. I'm also a good fan of like sort of compartmentalization and control. So I don't know what's in your wall cavity. I would much rather you not breathe, whatever that is. That's an easy thing to say across the board. So if we see large holes open to a wall cavity someplace, in most homes, our sheetrock is that primary air barrier that's going to stop the outside air from directly coming in.
Sheetrock is drywall.
Right, exactly. So drywall, sheetrock, and also trim anywhere that you see trim in your home, like baseboards, things like that. Door trim as well. We want to caulk and seal those areas from an air perspective because we want to gain more control over the airflow in our homes. I don't want any air coming from there. I don't want to be breathing it. So let's air seal those areas off. So that's...
And like above my door frames in my house, the builder never sealed it. Right. It doesn't mean that my house is going to grow mold because nobody sealed the door frame trim to the wall. It just means that that's now an area where there could be infiltration coming from the drywall and whatever stuff is in the drywall.
Right.
It's coming now into the house where I'm trying to control the air in the house. It's basically just like extra leakage.
Yeah, it's a complex interconnected pathway where the air comes from. And a lot of people don't quite understand, like, why would air come in from outside? And so there are driving forces that cause airflow to move through things. So pressure differences, like wind on a home, on the positive side of the home, the wind blowing against a house, well, air is going to want to come in because it's more pressure outside versus the pressure on the other side of that wall. So more goes to less. Similarly, on the other side of that, the wind going around the building is going to cause air to suck out of the home, of the holes on that side of the house. But the way we use our homes generally, like you open and close a door, whether it's interior or an exterior door, you're creating a slight pressure on the house where a little bit of air comes in during that shut of the door. And so there's all sorts of ways where airflow is going to happen. Also, more going to less from a moisture perspective. So when we have air that has lots of moisture in it versus dry air, the more is going to go to the less. And so the more moisture is going to go towards that less moisture. So these driving forces cause this air to come in and out of the house.
Okay. And then another way that not sealing up some of those gaps could impact someone. I would imagine if like the tile on your backsplash in your kitchen the grout is not well sealed, if there's openings or places where the grout has broken off, and then you're boiling a pot of water and you're not using the exhaust fan above not exhaust fan, what do you call it?
Yeah.
The exhaust fan above the stove, there's all this humidity, moisture, and if the pressure is right in the house, the moisture might go like into the wall cavity.
So that's an interesting sort of scenario.
These are the things that keep me up at night. I'm like, oh my God, there's mold in my wall now because I boiled water.
And so when we think about like backsplashes, that's to stop moisture from getting to the sheetrock and then into the wall. So a crack in your grout there, likely there's some sheetrock behind it. Likely it's going to stop there and not go further through. Worst case scenario is that you don't, for some reason, have sheetrock on the backsplash and you have a gap there. In a colder climate, this humidity would then go into the wall and could eventually, over time, cause an issue with inside the wall cavity, because that would be a condensing surface of that high humidity. In our hot, humid climate, that is a cooling-dominated climate where the cooling is done from the inside, you typically wouldn't run into that problem of boiling water on your stove and causing an issue inside that grout. So.
Okay, great. Are there any other things that you notice, either in your inspections or just in your work in general, that feel like they could be simple things that people should just know about so that they're protecting their home better or just protecting their health and wherever they're renting better?
Yeah, so I mentioned temperature and humidity logging earlier. We could also just get an actual indoor air quality monitoring device that would help us with carbon dioxide levels, that would tell us about ventilation, total VOC levels, that would help us with maybe we have some chemical issues someplace. So there's things like that we could do to sort of then understand that further action is needed.
What would they look for? Like, what kind of device is that?
Yeah, so there's two brands I typically sort of recommend are Yoo-Hoo and AirThings. AirThings also has radon on it. Radon isn't talked about very much in our area because we're known to have low radon, but everybody
in Central Texas
is known on the radon maps to be a very low area. But everybody who I say, hey, get a radon monitor, they end up with medium to high levels of radon. And so,
can you talk about radon? I don't know much about it.
Sure,
I know you've talked about it on previous podcasts, so
Happy
it's
to.
definitely an interesting topic, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so radon is a radioactive gas that comes up out of the soil, and it is a colorless, odorless gas and sort of fills up in our homes. It comes up out of the other parts of the ground as well, but the homes are like a container for it to be stored in. And it is the number one leading cause of lung cancer among non-smokers.
Wow.
So if you don't smoke and you get lung cancer, chances are it's because you have a high radon exposure, basically.
Wow.
So, we want to avoid any radon, in my opinion. There's different levels of action that you take. The WHO being down at 2 picocuries per liter, which is just an amount of radon in your home. And then there's the EPA.
So you want the amount of radon in your home should be 2 of this measurement amount? Like the quantity is 2?
Yeah. So no, 2 is the action level. If your home has more than 2 picocuries per liter, you should take action and try and fix the radon in your home. And so my home, for example, I monitor all the time. I have an average over my year of 0.68 picocuries per liter.
Okay.
And 0.68 is the equivalent of smoking about a cigarette a day or so from a cancer risk perspective.
You're saying that in your home, which I imagine is top-notch air quality.
Yeah, it's pretty good, unfortunately.
Like, as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Is still equivalent to smoking 1 cigarette a day in terms of your cancer risk?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, significant. Exactly. And so, again, I don't want to it sounds like I'm trying to make people buy these monitors and freak out about things.
No.
I don't want to make people afraid of lung cancer or something like that. That's not my goal here. It's just, there's this colorless, odorless gas that impacts our health, and we should probably be aware of it.
Yeah. And I want to remind everyone again about this funnel, because we are surrounded by mold all the time. And you're surrounded by toxins all the time. You're surrounded by radon all the time. But our bodies are designed to filter these things out. Our bodies are so intelligent and resilient. And I mean, I'm living proof of the resilience of the human body, because a year ago, was basically dying. And now I'm doing so much better. So even if you're living in toxic mold for years, your body is designed to be able to overcome these things. And as we talked about, sometimes there's a genetic component that maybe you're less efficient at that, or you can't do it in the same way as other people. But if there is radon in your home, if there's high CO2 levels, if there's VOCs, like these are all just things to bring awareness to people so that they can know about it. You don't even have, like, somebody listening to this might decide to make zero changes to their environment, and that's totally fine. The goal is just to make people aware of what are our options, because maybe someone doesn't have the ability to manage their humidity levels in their home, but maybe they can do something about the radon. That might not be a good example, but some of these things might be easily actionable for some people, and other things might be more easily actionable for others. So this is just to give awareness to people who've never even heard of radon.
Right.
It's not to scare anybody. It's not to say that, oh my God, your house probably has such harmful levels of radon. But it is pretty alarming that even the ideal radon level in a home is equivalent to smoking a cigarette a day from a cancer risk perspective.
Yeah. And to that end, right, like I haven't completely sort of remediated my radon issue at 0.68. And so my point of saying that is I know I have a problem technically with radon and I haven't done anything about it in my own home. And so it is okay to recognize that there are certain issues that we are not right now going to fight that battle, right? Whereas my parents had 7 picocuries per liter in their house. And again, action
You
level.
said anything above 2.
Action level for WHO is 2 and the EPA is 4. So anything above 4, technically, you really should take action. But
what does taking action look like?
Yeah, so radon mitigation systems basically get put in place. And so source control, we want to keep the radon out. So we basically get a high power fan and we suck air from under the slab to try and remove the air before it gets in through the slab. So pretty intense, but sometimes not super expensive and sometimes pretty easy to sort of reduce our exposure. Ventilation would be another one. Obviously, source control, sealing the gaps and cracks in your slab, but adding extra ventilation to your house is always a good thing. So
okay, great. Yeah, that's really helpful to know. Did we even check the radon levels in my house when you came by?
No. So continuous monitoring is important. Spot checking for me has no value. I want to know what it is long term because today it could be, it's sometimes in my house it's 0.1 and it's great. And other times it's 1, right?
Okay.
And so if I happen to come to someone's house on a 0.1 day and, oh, look, everything is great. And then the next day it's, it's much higher. It's like, no, we need continuous monitoring of this, not just a snapshot in time.
Okay. And that is something that you can monitor with one of those brands that you named
Correct.
earlier?
Yeah. The Air Things does radon.
Okay. The Air Things is the one that does the radon and all of the other.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. That's really helpful. I'm now curious about the radon levels in my home. Well, this is really helpful. I think that this will give people a lot of information. And I also just want to reiterate that even though there are so many elements of this and it's all really complicated for the average person to comprehend and wrap their head around, this is why there are experts like you out there who can give guidance to homeowners, renters, whoever you tend to work with. Anybody who's living inside of a home can be more educated about their air quality and how it affects their health. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to be terrified of the air inside their home. It's just these are helpful things to know about so that you can make more informed decisions, whatever those decisions may be.
Definitely. And it really comes back down to these sort of building science basics of if we have problems in the home, we want to remove those problems from the home. It's that simple. Like, okay, if we have mold in the home, we want to remove the moldy materials. We want to keep the outside air out in a humid climate. We don't want those condensing surfaces that could lead to mold. We want, properly managing our humidity inside the home. Better filtration is going to help all around for all of the things I just mentioned. So a lot of indoor air quality, whether it's radon or mold or chemicals, can all be fixed with very similar tools, ventilation or dehumidification or filtration. So while it sounds complicated, it's pretty easy to implement some of these things like an air purifier, for example, to really make a big impact on indoor air quality. With activated charcoal if chemicals are a problem for you. So I don't want to overwhelm people to think that they have to fix all the things. Like if your concern is this, then, often an HEPA filter is going to have a lot of other impacts, not just chemicals or particles or mold spores or fragments or whatever we're concerned about. So.
Okay, great. Are there any other final thoughts that you have that you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, knowledge for me is power. I don't want to make people afraid or indecisive about what's happening here. We all have to sort of make our own choices. And the more information we have, the more we can make better choices on what's good for us. So
Absolutely. How can people get a hold of you, get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
definitely. So my website is iaqtexas.com, email sean@iaqtexas.com, and Instagram is another good thing to follow. I don't post on there hardly at all anymore. I need to be posting more on there, but that's IAQ Texas.
IAQ Texas.
Yes, IAQ is indoor air quality, and then Texas is spelled out. So IAQ Texas.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge with everyone. I appreciate it so much. I appreciated you coming to my house and being so thorough and helping educate me on all the things that I didn't know. I think these topics are so important. So we're really lucky to have you on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. All right.